What's going on, guys? Jason here, back with another video on this wonderful Saturday. On my way to a meeting, and I just thought, you know what, maybe I would just make my long video now about my alcoholic or drunk log with sobriety. It was on the top of my head, so I figured let's just do it now. I know it's in the long format, but this is what I got right now. So where do I start? So I had a pretty good upbringing. My parents were really good, and I didn't really experience with anything until the age of 21. Before that, I did what I call the fake it until you make it. I would go with my friends in high school when I was like 16, and I'd pretend to smoke cigarettes, like I wouldn't inhale, you know what I mean? Like I'd kind of fake it, I guess, fake it till you make it. And, I'd pretend to smoke weed, like I wouldn't inhale. Like I think I was just doing it to, maybe to fit in, because they all did that. And, so I never did that stuff, I guess. But I was just trying to fit in. So to fast forward, I kind of slid by in school, graduated, and was kind of, I was in a relationship, and then that relationship ended. High school, sweetheart, she was a little younger than me, a year or so. And I was lost, I was 19, I was depressed, I didn't have any life goals, or I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't go to college right away, and so I skated around a little bit. And once I turned 21, a couple months after that was when the first time that I started to drink. I had never had a drink before I turned 21, and when I took that first sip, or had that first beer, and started to get the effects from it, that's when my alcohol took right off. That just that turned me into a person, or another person that I wanted at the time. I was I was partying. It really took off quickly. I was responsible for a very short time. I walked down the street to my friend's house that was close by, and we partied. We would party, and we wouldn't drive, but we would still party and drink. And I did that for a number of months. And then I always remember a friend, I was walking someplace, and I always drove. I always had my license since I was young, so I'm not sure why I was walking, but he pulled up and he was like, "Hey man," this is about 6 months after I turned 21. He goes, "Hey man, you want to go to the bar?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure, why not?" And that's when it really kicked off for me. It was, alcohol, women. That changed everything for me. That was just like, put me in a different world that I just didn't know about. And that's just, honestly, that's what I live for. I barely worked. I had no career. I had no drive. I ran through a bunch of jobs, and all I was doing was just really getting through the week, just to get to the weekend so I could drink, just so I could go out on a Friday night and go downtown and just bar hop and just get hammered and just be with women. And it was just a constant cycle. And then that's what I did for years. And I had an OUI at 23. I decided drinking and drive. I drank and drove all the time. I don't know how I didn't get 100 DUIs, but luckily I only had one. But yeah, I lost my license for 3 months, and I didn't drive, and that was just, that sucked. But I just kept going. I never, thought I had a problem. I ended up, having a son, and then I had a daughter. They're 18 months apart, and I just, did the dad thing. I would go, sometime without drinking, weeks or even a couple of months. But I've always just been skating by, just kind of figuring it out. And, alcohol was always there. Never once can I remember ever going out and just being like having one drink, having one beer. That was never the case. Fast forward to about 30, that's when I started, right around that 31, I started my own business, and that really took off. Again, still drinking, I don't want to say I had it under control, but it was manageable, if you will. I never had gotten into a ton of trouble, but that's just because I didn't get caught. I drank and drove all the time. And, the business was thriving. It was thriving for a number of years. I was really good at what I was doing, and things were going along. But like I said, those weekends would come around, and, my kids were younger at the time, so, they might go to their grandparents or whatever. And I would go out and party and, hook up with girls and just do all that stuff. And just crazy stories. Even before then, in my early 20s, I would get kicked out of bars. I would get into fights. I'm kind of backtracking. This was in my earlier 20s before kind of having kids and stuff, but it doesn't matter. Getting kicked out of places. I also got into a fight one time where I cracked my head open. I don't know if I got knocked out or if I slipped when the person hit me. Hit my head on the curb. Could have died, Suffered a brain bleed. Spent 5 days in the hospital. Like I said, I could be dead. I could be dead. And did that stop me from drinking? No. I blamed it on, I always was wondering who did it, and, I'll never know. That I could walk by them, because I have about 2 days of no memory about that. 2 full days. And I always wondered, who did it, and I might still think about it, but the fact is that if I wasn't drinking and going out and getting drunk, none of that would have happened. Never would that have happened. I would have never almost died, literally. I had to learn how to talk. My speech was a little messed up. I would forget things. I was, uneasy on my feet for about 2 months. It wasn't good, but it wasn't enough to stop me, and then I kept going. And then, about, 5 years ago, I got into a relationship with somebody that, I always remember when I started this relationship that she said, we said something about we went out or whatever, and she was like, "Oh, I'm a daily drinker." So I started dating somebody that was a daily drinker. But, that's not like her, or my alcoholism isn't her fault, that's my fault. I started drinking every day, and I'm the one to blame with that, because I made that stupid choice to start drinking every day. And that's what I did for, 3.5 years. I drank every single day. It was bad. It was, drinking on the job, drinking, during the day. Every single day. When I say every day, I mean every day. And it was always on my mind. Sometimes, man, just to think about it, it just was crazy. It It was just, I mean, I would go on trips and like, you know, with the kids and just that was always on my mind about where I could go. Like if I was going to a place that, you know, was limited with alcohol, you know, where I could get my alcohol, and just planning my whole day around it. I mean, it was just so exhausting, but that's just how I lived, and I did that, and I did that until I guess I didn't want to do it anymore. And that's when I just started, you know, when I started to you know, the journey to quit. I quit once a year and a half ago. I made it about 3.5 weeks, and I didn't do the work. And when you don't do the work, you go back to drinking, and that's what I did. So that would have been April of 2024. Fast forward to February of 2025. That was the first time I really took it seriously. And I went to the hospital, wanted to make sure everything was good. I'm not a doctor, so to take this with a grain of salt. I can't give any medical advice, but don't quit cold turkey if you're a heavy drinker. You know, like I said, I'm not a medical professional. I can't give medical advice, but speak with a physician. They're there to help. So anyways, I did that, and you know, I was locked into a program, and I made it a little over 3 months, and I got a job. I made the excuse of the job, and then, you know, I stopped going to meetings and stopped being involved. And then a few weeks later, I relapsed. You know, I drank, I think, you know, 2 nights or something in a row. They kind of blended together, and it did nothing for me. It was not this oh wow moment that, you know, I have this under control and this is fine. I've got this time under my belt that I haven't had in a long time. Because like I said before that, I drank every single day for years, every day. So in my mind, it was like, wow, I went, you know, 100 days sober. This is great. You know, I got this under control. I didn't have it under control. I still don't have it under control. I'm still learning every day. So I went back to it, you know, and I got focused. You know, relapse is a part of a lot of people's stories, and yeah, I'm back at 3.5 months sober. You know, Alcohol Anonymous has really changed my life. I know it's different for everybody. There's a lot of programs out there, a lot of other programs that work. It's all dependent on where you live. For me, my personal experience, this has been a game changer. I've met so many people through this program. I've made so many new friends, and it's been amazing. You know, I learned from my last experience, and I work a lot of hours now. I work 50 hours a week, and I don't make excuses anymore. I make sure I get to a meeting you know, almost every day. I would say 90%, you know, every day. And I put it before everything. I put it before my kids. I put it before family, because when I put myself first in my sobriety, everything else in my life is better. And if you do that, I can almost guarantee you that will be the case. Now, it doesn't happen overnight. Like I said, I'm still pretty new. I learn stuff every day, but my life is good now. You know, I've got a roof over my head. You know, I've got a decent paying job. You know, I've got a vehicle. It might not be the nicest one. You know, it's got some paint on it and stuff. That's kind of what I did for a living, or do. But I'm happy. You know, that relationship that I was talking about obviously didn't work out. Went through a lot of hardships in reference to that, and other things that I, you know, I had a business that went sour because of my drinking, but I live a pretty minimal type life now, and I'm happy. I'm happy with myself. I don't have to, you know, be in a relationship to feel that way. And it's good, you know what I mean? It feels good. Like, you know, we have this is our brain. Like, we can make the choice. It's just that we have to put the time and the effort in. I got tired of, puking up blood, and because I did that, or God, this is embarrassing, but man, just having a night or two that I urinated while sleeping, man. Like, this is what alcohol does, and that's embarrassing to say, but it's the truth. I mean, I'm a grown ass man, and just like, but you got to put in the work. You got to put in the time. Whatever works for you, just do it. I mean, life is just so much better, and I have a long ways to go. I am no saint. I don't know everything. I don't know nothing, to be honest with you. And I take everything one day at a time. I've said it so many times. Yesterday does not matter. It doesn't. Tomorrow we don't have to worry about. Tomorrow's not here yet. It's all about today. Stay sober one day at a time, or 6 hours at a time, or 2 hours at a time, and they'll start to stack up. And I got a long ways to go, but I just take little strides every single day. Just little baby steps to make my life a little better. What can I do today that will make my life a little bit better than it was yesterday? It could be something simple. It could be doing just an extra 10 minutes of cleaning that I wouldn't have done, or spend an extra 5-10 minutes with my kids because they're older now, or whatever. Just anything. And there's if you're struggling, or if you've relapsed, don't beat yourself up over it, man. We've all been there. 100 times over, and if you just have the willingness to stay sober, you'll have a lot of success there. And anybody that's watching this, that's struggling, I'm there. I'm here for you. Please comment below, share your story if you will, share this, and let's help each other out, because we're all in the same boat and we all want to do better. I love you guys so much.